I'm Greg Giuliano. I'm an executive coach, organizational change consultant, and author. I believe leaders have the power to shape the future and change people's lives. I also believe people who challenge the status quo and go beyond usual and ordinary are rare. They're willing to go to the edge and push farther, over and over again. When I find these ultra leaders, I love to talk with them. In each episode, I talk with ultra leaders to learn how they do what they do and how they keep growing as leaders. I promise you a full dose of ultra leadership from other ultra leaders just like you in every conversation. We're at the edge of another episode. Let's jump in. Welcome to another episode of Ultra Leadership. My guest today is Julie Person. Julie is Chief Administrative Officer at Third Harmonic Bio. She brings more than 20 years of experience in building biopharma organizations that align people practices with strategy to drive successful outcomes for patients and teams. In her role, Julie oversees human resources, corporate communications, and facilities. Julie joined Third Harmonic Bio from Pneumora Therapeutics, where she served as Chief People Officer. And prior to Pneumora, she was head of human resources at Audentes Therapeutics and Sangamo Therapeutics. Prior to Sangamo, Julie was the global head of talent management at Shire, where she played a key role in the integrations of both Bexalta International to Shire and then Shire into Takeda Pharmaceutical Company. Prior to Shire, Julie spent 12 years at McKesson Corp in various HR roles with increasing responsibility. Julie received her undergraduate degree in communications from St. Mary's College of California and completed the University of Michigan Ross School of Business Executive Leadership Program. I've known her a long time. She's an awesome person, a great leader, and I'm thrilled to have her here today. Welcome, Julie.
Thanks, Greg. Really excited to be a part of your podcast today.
Thank you. I can't wait. So I'm going to start. You're in a leading edge industry. And so I'm curious, where do you see the next edge? I want to get to leadership in more particular, but where do you see is the next edge for your industry and your company?
Yeah, so biotech, as you probably know, is a really interesting industry. So while our mission is to serve patients, which is incredibly inspirational, it's an incredibly volatile industry. And so we're always looking for ways to steady the workforce, if you will, to be able to get through that volatility. So if you know anything about VUCA, like biotech epitomizes a VUCA world, which for those of you who don't know, VUCA stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And drug development, Greg, is just a really hard thing to do. Like 92% of all drugs in development fail, which means you need to be able to navigate through that uncertainty and keep fighting the good fight day in and day out.
Yeah. Wow. So leading transformation or just leading growth, right? We need to grow a company, leading and helping people to navigate, and take care of themselves in that VUCA environment, and then leading others. That's a particular capability. And, for an organization, how do you build that capability? And what are the skills that you're looking for within your team and across the organization? We need to be able to respond, be grounded in the midst of volatility and being able to lead without certainty, where things aren't simple. It's very complex and you just don't know sometimes. So when you think about building the organization collective capacity and then the individual capacity, where are you focusing?
Yeah, absolutely. That's all right. Like when you think about working in biotech, it's all around like pivot, be flexible, be flexible, be flexible. So when we think about building those skills and capabilities, I think about three things. Think about providing clarity. That's the most important thing that you can do, because as timeline shifts or pipeline shifts or program shifts, each person knowing exactly what they're accountable for is super important. So being able to provide clarity of like, where are we going now? How has that shifted? And what is the impact to an individual? And then what are they accountable for? Like, that's just table stakes. And that requires, all of the structures in place to be able to do that. The softer skill is around flexibility. How do you help people build the skill and behavior of being positively flexible? And so as things adjust, how are people responding to the change? How do they stay not anxious through the changes? And how do you build in recognition that you're doing a good job? A program might shift in its timeline, or a program might fail. That doesn't mean that you're a failure. And so that leads to us being able to flex into the next thing. And so that constant support and empowerment and reward and recognition that doesn't shift with timelines changing or things changing is really important. The third thing I think a lot about and practice is humanity. And maybe this sounds old school, but I strongly believe that when you feel a connection to your team and you know about each other, not just the projects you're working on, but you know where you've come from, who your kids are, what your dog's name is, what's important to you, what are your hot buttons. That interpersonal connection is often what gets us through the uncertainty. That we all know that we care about each other, we're rowing in the same direction, and good days and bad, we're really looking out for one another. I know it's a basic principle, but I don't think that's antiquated in any way. That connection is often what gets us through to the next step, and the ability to be flexible and resilient to take on the next piece of work.
Yeah, God, there's so many things I want to respond to. This my attention deficit. Where do I go with now? So I'll start with the last piece too. That a leader's job facilitating that connectedness, so critical, right? I remember we've done lots of leadership development work and lots of work with teams, and people don't engage, a program or even a mission. They want the work to have meaning, but they engage other people, right? That's what we're trying to help. I know you. I want you to succeed as much as I want my own success. So we're in this together. So that piece, I 100% agree with you, is so critical. The piece that jumped out to me was you using the modifier positively in front of flexible. That some people will be begrudgingly flexible, they'll change. But you're trying to get that, no, be positively flexible. So how do you encourage that? And when you don't see it, how do you respond when you're not seeing that?
Right. It's a hard one, right? I think when you're asking people to be flexible, it's often because of the change, right? And so it's first how you approach the change. So let's say you have a drug failure or a timeline shift. It's okay, no fingers pointed. This happened. Now here's how we're moving forward. Here's the plan. And so I think clarifying the plan and not looking too much in the rearview mirror helps assign no blame, which enables people to feel okay, we learned a lot in that. Now, how are we going to take the next step? Which enables them to be more positive about doing it again. Because when there are consequences for things really out of your control, like finger pointing or, trying to overhash what happened, then people are not that comfortable with taking another risk, right? Accelerating into the next wave of whatever project or work it is. And so that positive flexibility is jumping into the next round with as much enthusiasm as you went into the first round. And there being positive reinforcers of doing that versus negative consequences.
Yeah. When you say that just happened, right? So now what? That pivot piece. Because I say that with folks that I coach all the time. They'll call and say, hey, somebody on my team quit or something happened. And I go, okay, well, that happened. So now what, right? And it's part of the positively flexible, which I'm going to steal, is not being reactive in those moments, but because you're providing clarity of here's where we're going and what's your important work to do right now. Okay, that just happened. So now what, right? So you're creating clarity at the we level, but also at the you level. Okay, things are going to change. What clarity do you need from me so that you can continue to shape your work when things are changing all the time?
Right, absolutely. The clarity, and then the recognition of the hard work that went into the first round. Nothing's for naught. It's what did we learn, and like how do you clarify what's expected next?
Yeah. So there's a real researchers, but a real learner's mindset that sounds like you're bringing to the work and that you're trying to create across your organization. That we know a whole bunch of stuff, but we need to be curious if we're going to be positively flexible.
Right. We're learning, we're curious, we're sharing what we're learning, we're bringing other people along. There's no like holding on to information for just yourself. Like we have to recognize the power in the collective. And the more we collectively know, the more we can move forward, and potentially the more we can navigate around issues that cause us to pivot in the first place.
Yeah, so we're getting there. We were talking about it, but I want to ask a question that kind of puts a finer point on it as you're looking across the organization. And I'm thinking beyond just, biotech. This is any organization. When you think about, let me put it this way. What is the behavior or practice when you think about the organization being as effective as possible? What's the behavior or practice that if everybody on the team did it, the team's performance would just go up?
I think about two things when you ask me that question. I think about, and this factors into actually our hiring practices. I think about if everyone came to the table with that we mindset. I want to work for a company that wants to do something collective together. That's our mission. We're in this together toward a common purpose, a common goal, and that we hire no one who's in it for themselves. That is how I personally operate. That's how we operate the company we're leading now. And that's the first order of business is everyone's got to be in it together, and you make no exceptions.
Yeah.
That's a hard one. Like we can have a whole nother podcast on hiring for culture and hiring for fit and using that to succeed and meet your goals. But the second thing I think about, and don't laugh at me when I say this, is if everyone just applied situational leadership to their day in and day out, which is as you work with your team members, what is the place that they're coming to you in that work? And what do you need to give them at the place they need to receive it to be able to do that work? I think it was like Ken Blanchard, right, who wrote Situational Leadership. Yeah. I learned that in my first job at McKesson. I will never forget it. And now I teach it regardless of what role I'm in, because just meeting people where they are and putting yourself in their shoes for like, do they need to be empowered or do they need more information? Do they need to be walked through steps 1 through 10 or set free to do it on their own? Like that, for me, makes a massive difference in being able to achieve your goals and in a way that's very empowering for people.
Yeah. Well, I would never laugh at that because I agree with it, right? So it's 100%. And for me, it's ties into when you're leading in that VUCA environment, you have to be very present and you have to be curious, right? And it's data driven, right? So even when you're dealing with people, it's data. The person I'm in this conversation, what's the data that I'm getting from them? I have to pretend that I don't know you. I haven't seen you in a while. So something might have changed from yesterday to today. So right. Being curious and allowing the data of the moment inform you, right? To what's this situation telling me so that I can be responsive in this moment to this person or to this particular task.
Yes.
So I totally get that.
Totally get it. And it applies to every person, every level, every situation.
Yeah. That intentional curiosity. So what do you do? And this is transferable across an organization. You have somebody on your team who they're brilliant, but they're not with the program of the we mindset, of the being curious. They're showing up as a knower. And we know, there are lots of times I've been in organizations where leader will say, I've got this person on my team and they are so flippin' smart. They're really good at it. And they drive everybody crazy because they don't work and play well with others.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you do in those situations where, I've got this brilliant person, but boy, they bring a lot of drama. What do you do?
I know. Well, you've known me for a long time. I'm pretty direct. So I usually tell people, it feels like what you're bringing to the table, this pattern that you've had that's led you to the success, might not be working so well for you right now. Would you imagine a time where you can try on maybe a different approach, where you were a little more curious and let's see how that works for you? And if they bite at that apple, awesome. They usually have some aha moment where that works. And if they don't, you might try it a couple more times. And then if that doesn't work, then they can go find happiness and joy somewhere else that values that mindset versus the we mindset.
Yeah. I love how you frame it. You frame it as a coaching conversation. You ask that question because it really is, what is the person trying to achieve? Do you even realize that how you're showing up is incongruent with the rest of the team or with what we're trying to do? So I love how you reframe that. And I love that you're direct. And I wish more people were very direct like that and put on that coaching hat in those moments so that it doesn't turn into a performance conversation where, okay, now you got 90 days and we're documenting, right? So the sooner you just lean into what's probably a difficult conversation for you, you can actually reduce the likelihood that it's going to turn into a management conversation where you're going to have to invite somebody to go someplace else to find their joy and happiness.
Right, because I don't believe that anyone comes to the table wanting to fail.
No.
And I think most people come with a set of successes behind them that have worked for them in the past. And then you get into this new situation. You're like, why isn't this working for me?
Right.
And so we try to uncover why isn't it working? And I'm sure, I have my own personal experience with getting a new situation. Like, wow, that always seemed to go over well for everyone else. Why is it not going over well here? Yeah. And you just need someone else sometimes to be a mirror for you and help you through that. So I just take the approach of everyone wants to succeed. And there's a right place or a right fit or right coaching for people to help them.
Absolutely.
See what you can't.
Absolutely. If they're not performing the way that you hoped that they would, there's something in the way. And it might be that lack of awareness, or it might be something else in the environment. But just don't shy away from those conversations. Don't put those off. Lean into those and make it a coaching conversation, because a coaching conversation where you have to give some feedback is a heck of a lot easier than that performance conversation where you have to say goodbye to somebody.
Absolutely. And it's the right thing to do. It's the kind human thing to do. Letting people sit in, anxiety is not a fair thing.
Yeah. Well, and it demonstrates to somebody, if it's going to be a difficult conversation, it's going to make me as the leader uncomfortable. By having that conversation, I'm communicating to the person that I think I value them enough to tell them this, right? It's like only the people who really love me tell me I have spinach in my teeth.
Exactly.
And that's what you're doing to that with that person.
Right.
So you're saying, I care enough about you that we're going to both be uncomfortable a little bit, but this is good for you, and I'm willing to do it with you. So you're awesome at a whole bunch of stuff, but like all of us, there's probably something that you do that, I wish I didn't do that. So how do you get in your own way sometimes?
Probably I have more than one example, I'm sure. But the thing that has, how I get in my way sometimes, and honestly I've gotten this feedback over time and have been trying to work on it, is I can be immediately judgmental in a situation. And especially as I've been in more leadership positions, it's like, well, how come with all this experience, someone doesn't show up this way? Or why are we still having this problem? And my first move is to be judgy around it. And I have to catch myself being myself oftentimes of why am I reacting that way? Force myself to put myself in that person's shoes. And then think about ways that I can be curious about their perspective versus judgy. And I think judgy is my defense mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
We know that saying that when you hear or see people doing something that bugs you, it's often because you do it too.
It reminds you, right?
Remind you
It's
of
like a
yourself.
mirror in some
Right.
way. Yeah.
Right. And so I'm like, okay, like what's going on here? So I oftentimes get in that judgy space and need to create some reflection for myself before I continue to engage and just take a moment to be curious.
Yeah. And you aren't alone in that, right? We all do that. That's the way that we make meaning of our situation. We tell ourselves a story. And the easiest first draft is there's something wrong with this person, right? And so no matter how much experience we have, that's a default for a lot of us, for all of us, is that our first draft is about the other person. And then, oh shoot, what is this saying about me? What,
Right.
and how do I show up in this and contribute to this? And
And
so
if you lead
that's
with that, it can be so damaging to relationships.
right.
So,
Yeah. If I just assume that my story is the truth versus it's just my version, I'm probably going to make it worse instead of making it better.
100% going to make it worse.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah. So
Yes.
that being curious, right? And that's part of the being positively flexible too. It's like, okay, my version of the truth is not, capital T truth. It's just my version. So showing up curious about, okay, where are we? What's the actual truth going on here? And that's where we can help people, and that's where we can grow too.
Absolutely. And sometimes being curious is hard to do when you're also busy, overwhelmed, hitting deadlines, right? So
right, when everything's volatile and uncertain, and you got to
everything's
complex,
VUCA.
and you're going really,
It's hard to be
really
curious.
fast. How do you stay curious? How do you stay grounded and present? That's a full-time job.
Yeah. So building that muscle, right?
Yeah.
That your muscle memory responses, pause, be curious.
Yeah. Wow. So this has been great. I have learned a ton today. I'm really grateful that you took the time to come on and share all this truth with us. And so I'm going to give you the last word. And, what are you grateful for? Or what's your message to leaders out there who are listening? So the floor is yours.
Thanks. And this has been a ton of fun. Nice to reconnect. And, we've learned a lot of leadership lessons from you and happy to carry that forward. So I think I'm really most grateful to be able to be in a position to help people thrive and to do what they love to do, whatever experience they're bringing into the table, and help people be just a little bit better so that they can continue to grow and learn and achieve. And I'm especially grateful to be doing that in an industry where we're making medicines for patients who really need them, and to be able to combine what I love to do with a mission-driven industry is pretty incredible and gets me out of bed in a positive way every day.
Awesome. Thank you, Julie. I really, really appreciate you being here. It's been terrific. And thanks to you for listening. We hope you enjoyed the episode. Share with your friends. There was so much good stuff in here. So spread the word, and we will see you next time on Ultra Leadership.
If you're enjoying Ultra Leadership, please take a minute and give us a review wherever you find your podcasts. And please stay in touch. Sign up for our Ultra Leadership newsletter at ultraleadership.com. Now, before you jump to your next meeting, I invite you to reflect on what you heard today. What stood out for you? What insight might you want to incorporate into your leadership practice? Until next time, remember, as a leader, you always have the power to shape the future and change lives. So go to the edge and push farther. Thanks for listening.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.